Have you ever been caught between a fool and a king? What if the survival of your entire household depended on how quickly you could think, speak, and act wisely? Well, that's exactly what happened to one woman in the Bible, Abigail. Her story is packed with wisdom, courage, and divine intervention. And trust me, it's not just an ancient tale, it holds lessons for every one of us today. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more life-changing Bible stories that inspire, challenge, and transform your walk with God. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Now, let's get into the remarkable story of Abigail, the woman who stood between a fool and a king. Our story begins in 1 Samuel 25. David, the future king of Israel, was still on the run from King Saul. He and his men were living in the wilderness of Paran, surviving off the land and relying on the kindness of people they encountered. In that region lived a wealthy man named Nabal. Nabal was extremely rich. He owned thousands of sheep and goats, and his business was thriving. But there was just one problem: Nabal's character didn't match his wealth. Scripture describes him as harsh, evil in his dealings, and arrogant. Nabal's name actually means fool, and unfortunately, he lived up to it. He was stubborn, disrespectful, and lacked discernment. But Nabal had a wife. Her name was Abigail, and she was the complete opposite of her husband. The Bible describes Abigail as intelligent and beautiful. But her beauty was not just skin deep. She was wise, discerning, and quick to act in times of crisis. It was the season of sheep shearing, an event similar to harvest time. It was a festive season, and it was customary for wealthy landowners to show hospitality and generosity to others during this time. David, knowing how his men had protected Nabal's shepherds in the wilderness without taking anything from them, sent messengers to Nabal with a polite request. David didn't demand anything. He simply asked for whatever Nabal felt led to give in appreciation. The message was respectful. David referred to Nabal as my brother. He wished him peace, prosperity, and long life. But instead of showing gratitude or even basic courtesy, Nabal insulted David. He mocked David, questioning his identity and dismissing him as a runaway servant. When David's men returned and reported Nabal's rude response, David was furious. Remember, David had an army of trained men, and in that moment of anger, he told his men to strap on their swords. David was ready to wipe out every male in Nabal's household. It seemed like a disaster was inevitable. David, a man after God's heart, was about to act in vengeance. But then, someone told Abigail what had happened. One of Nabal's servants reported how David's men had been good to them in the wilderness. They had protected them like a wall day and night. And now, Nabal had insulted them. Abigail knew what was at stake. She didn't waste time blaming her husband or panicking. She acted quickly. She gathered an abundant gift: 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, roasted grain, raisins, and fig cakes. She loaded them on donkeys and set out to meet David without telling her husband. As Abigail approached, she saw David and his men coming toward her, ready for bloodshed. She got off her donkey, fell on her face before David, and bowed low to the ground. Her speech was one of the most powerful and wise appeals recorded in Scripture. She took responsibility, even though she hadn't done anything wrong. She said, "Please let your servant speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say." She acknowledged her husband's foolishness, calling him by his name Nabal, which means fool. But she didn't dwell on his shortcomings. Instead, she reminded David of his destiny. She spoke life over him, calling him God's chosen one. She pointed out that God had been fighting David's battles and would continue to establish his house. And then, with remarkable insight, she said something that changed the course of events. "Let no wrongdoing be found in you as long as you live. When the Lord has fulfilled for you every promise he made concerning you, you won't have the guilt of needless bloodshed on your hands." Abigail reminded David of who he really was: a future king with a divine assignment. She gave David the opportunity to stop and reconsider before making a mistake that could haunt him forever. David was moved by her wisdom. He blessed her, saying that if she hadn't come quickly, he would have destroyed every male in Nabal's household by morning. He accepted her gift and told her to go home in peace. David recognized that God had sent her to prevent him from shedding innocent blood. Abigail returned home to find Nabal hosting a grand feast, drunk and completely unaware of the danger he had narrowly escaped. She waited until the next morning to tell him everything that had happened. When she did, Nabal's heart failed him, and he became like stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he praised God for avenging him without David needing to lift a hand. David then sent for Abigail and asked her to become his wife. She accepted, And so Abigail went from being married to a fool to becoming the wife of Israel's future king. The story of Abigail is more than just a historical event, it's filled with life lessons. Wisdom and quick action save lives. Abigail didn't sit and wait. She acted swiftly and wisely. Sometimes, hesitation can cost us or others dearly. Godly wisdom combined with timely action is powerful. God uses peacemakers. Abigail stood between a fool and a king and chose the path of peace. Jesus later said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Being a peacemaker doesn't mean being passive, it often requires courage and wisdom. Your character speaks louder than your circumstances. Abigail was married to a wicked man, but she didn't let his character define hers. No matter your surroundings, you can choose integrity, wisdom, and grace. God sees and rewards the righteous. Abigail's actions not only saved her household but elevated her to a place of honor. God sees those who act justly, even when no one else is watching. So, what about you? Are there areas in your life where God is calling you to step in with wisdom and courage? Maybe you're standing between conflict and peace, between foolishness and divine purpose. Let Abigail's story inspire you to act with discernment, humility, and boldness. God is still looking for people who are willing to stand in the gap. If you enjoyed this story and want more Bible stories that bring Scripture to life, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Leave a comment below, telling us what stood out to you the most from Abigail's story. And remember, wisdom and courage will always open doors that fear and foolishness cannot. Thanks for watching. See you in the next episode.